Buenas, buenas. Welcome to another episode of Hablamos Spanglish, where we explore the remarkable journey of Zoe Colón, or Zoe Colón, a Puerto Rican native with a unique background that defies the stereotypes and inspires us all. Born in the Bronx to parents who migrated from Garrochales, Barceloneta, Zoe's story is a testament to resilience and the power of potential. Zoe faced language barriers and discrimination while growing up in a low-income, single-parent household, but she overcame this obstacle ultimately by becoming part of this invisible giant in her community and advocating for justice and inclusion. In this episode, Zoe shares her passion for addressing the injustices faced in Puerto Rico, her role in the Puerto Rico Research Hub at UCF, and the importance of recognizing and preserving Latino history and culture. Zoe's story serves as a reminder of the strength in unity and understanding each other's journey. Zoe, welcome to Hablamos Spanglish. Bienvenida.
Thank you. Gracias, Ana Carolina. Un placer estar acá.
Thank you for coming. We're excited to have you and having this conversation today about, your story. I know you are from New York.
I'm most excited because of the name. I love it. That's my experience. New Yorican.
There you go. There you go. See, that's, Hablamos Spanglish is what makes you who we are, right? As immigrants. And even if we were born here, we came from our countries, if we learn English at home or at school or at home, that makes us part of who we are,
You
right?
essentially live a double life.
Yeah.
You're bicultural, and growing up, depending on where and when, like some people, there was a stigma attached to speaking Spanglish. So I'm just really excited that you've embraced it as the name, as a title of your show, because it really shows that we should be proud of speaking two languages and having two really rich experiences in this country.
It is. And I remember that, like, when I was going to school, meeting Latinos, right, at school, but that they wouldn't speak Spanish because they felt ashamed of speaking Spanish, right?
Right.
And so it is right now, I think things have changed. Y los Latinos estamos de moda, and now everybody wants to speak Spanish or Spanglish. So, but it cost me a little bit to really embrace it.
Right.
At the beginning, it was kind of difficult for me because I wouldn't speak in English even because I had my accent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't even apply for jobs because
thinking that they wouldn't take you.
Yeah, things like that. But today is all about you. I want to learn about Zoe.
Okay.
How was Zoe's experience growing on a bicultural house? And
so I'm Puerto Rican from the Bronx.
Okay.
We're a special breed. And my mom and my dad were born and raised in Puerto Rico, in Barceloneta, Garrochales, a really small, very low-income, modest community in Puerto Rico, and came over in the 70s.
Wow.
And they were factory workers. My mom was a seamstress in a factory in Manhattan.
Wow.
And so they moved to El Barrio. El Barrio is Spanish Harlem in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they had like one of these efficiency apartments where it's like you share a bathroom and all of this and that. And that's what they could afford. And then she became pregnant with me and we moved to the Bronx. And that's where I was born.
Okay.
And so I spoke Spanish at home. That was my first language. But then as soon as I got to, kindergarten, an interesting note is that I was put into special ed. Because of my limited English proficiency. And I think when I got to second grade, my teacher at the time said to my mom, no, she's like a genius. Like she doesn't need to be in special classes. It's just she needs to learn English. And so then I became English language dominant.
Okay.
And there's more to that, but it was great. I loved, coming home to the food, the culture, right? My mom, and she was learning English at the time. She was going to a 2-year school, a college to learn, Hostos Community College. And so I think that eventually we started speaking more English at home.
Okay.
Both
because
of us.
You guys were
Learning from each other, kind of, right?
Okay.
And so that was interesting. And so eventually she became more proficient, and I kind of lost my Spanish,
Wow.
and it was Spanglish to the extent that I could not complete a sentence in Spanish because I had forgotten. I just didn't know, especially when it comes to like more sophisticated vocabulary. And so that was for a long time. But then I started working with the immigrant community in Westchester County, and mostly folks from Mexico and Guatemala, and a lot of them had crossed the border, like just newly arrived, right? And they did not speak Spanglish.
Wow.
They only spoke Spanish, right? So I had no choice but to relearn my native language, which was Spanish. And so here was this Boricua from the Bronx, that had essentially forgotten her native language, and then now relearning Spanish with a newly arrived community, deeply marginalized, a lot of undocumented folks, and so I think that was like really powerful, that I was learning Spanish from.
It's the opposite, right?
Right.
Because you were saying like, I was speaking Spanglish, but because you were dominant in English. It's the opposite of what usually happens, and that's interesting, and that's why I love these conversations.
Yeah. I mean, I had the New York City like urban experience, So I was first generation born in this country. But as Puerto Ricans with citizenship, we still, especially in the first and second and third generations even, it's really hard. Like you still face a lot of the same challenges as, other immigrant communities, especially if you're low income. So I think it's really about class in general. It's like class, of course, race, ethnicity, where you're born, but I think class also has a lot to do with it. So we lived in a very concentrated, like impoverished neighborhood. But I just love the fact that I can say I kind of relearned my Spanish, from the immigrant community. And then fast forward 10 years later, I ended up in Orlando. And like, who doesn't speak Spanish in Orlando?
Yeah, exactly. But that wasn't like that when I got here, right?
No, it's true. It's changed.
Oh my gosh, it has changed.
It's changed. I came 8 years ago.
Okay.
And, yes, I spoke Spanish, but I was used to doing business in English. Right? So I use Spanish to relate to people, but for English for business. When I came to Orlando, I said, oh no, I have to do everything in Spanish to kind of gain credibility as a Boricua, as a Latina. So I would go to all the chamber meetings and meet all these wonderful people, and they knew English.
Yes.
But the credibility was built on your ability to speak Spanish.
That's true.
So I was like, okay, now I see, and so it was interesting. And then I lost the Mexican accent because I actually have more of a Mexican accent, and I regained my Puerto Rican accent. So it's really interesting. And then my name is Zoe.
Okay.
Zoe Melissa Colón. But then since I grew up in an English-dominant community, it was actually Latino and African-American mostly. Okay. They used to call me Zoe. But mi mamá me puso Zoe Colón, right? Zoe Melissa. And then when I got to Orlando, I didn't have to tell people that my real name was Zoe. They knew.
Wow.
They started calling me Zoe right from the beginning. And so it was really interesting. I'm like, okay, so my real name is being used in Orlando. I love this. And so I've had this real interesting journey with, speaking Spanglish, speaking one and the other, and then also like my surrounding and, how I built relationships using language, so it's really cool.
Wow. That's incredible. And so
yeah.
Like going back to, when you were little and you were, in Bronx, like you mentioned, those two cultures, right? So going back to your roots. So how was that, how did you, or let me rephrase this. How was your experience, because you were born here, but also, you were being raised by Puerto Rican mom. And then also because we're adding that component, like you said, is a different situation from where you are growing up, right?
Sure.
So how was that that experience?
Yeah, I think, I meant to elaborate on this earlier. It's like class is important, right? So access to resources, education, attainment, all of that is going to impact your experience in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were coming from very modest beginnings, very low income. Mom ended up being a single parent, right? So it was just my mom and I, and she had 2 jobs, to put food on the table. I started working at 13.
Wow.
So that experience, you adult very early on. It builds character. I was taking the train, the subway, into the city every day after school to work, since I was like 15. Before that, I was working with my mom where she worked when I was 13. So I think class and access to resources is really going to shape your experience no matter what, whether white, black, Latino, right? But as a Latino, at that time, even though it was a pretty black and brown community, there was still a lot of like infighting, so it's like, who has the power, so who's the newest to arrive, like that's who's going to get bullied, or who has the accent, that's who's going to get bullied. So there was a lot of violence.
Okay.
And also in terms of survival, I feel like there were a lot of people in my community who chose to sell drugs because that was, a better paying job, if you will, than maybe working in a factory for pennies or por pieza, como dicen. And the seamstresses, my mom used to work por pieza.
Wow.
So some people would take it home. Like the only way for me to make real money is to take my work home porque es por pieza, not by hour, or, So, so that was, definitely a factor in my upbringing, like where I grew up. I think at that time I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, there was a strong Puerto Rican presence in New York City because we started to migrate in the 30s and 40s. So there were like at least 2 generations, right, before I was born there. And so I was seeing people that looked like me in office, but we still didn't have the power that we needed to not feel like a marginalized community. And I think it's all really interesting because we are citizens, right? So it's like you come to this country from Puerto Rico, you are a citizen. And so you question, why am I being treated as if I wasn't a citizen? And so that's why I've always said, and I continue to say, that we're treated like second-class citizens. And that stands true today. And we've seen that with Hurricane Maria and other, and so, I've had conversations with other immigrants, friends, people from other communities, and they're like, oh, but you're American citizens. I'm like, I know. Isn't that like the irony?
Yeah.
Right?
And that makes me think, because like I said, every situation of any like immigrant that comes to the U.S., or even if it's a first generation, that you're born here, you go through that immigration process, or there is even algo que se llama que pasas por un duelo migratorio, and because there are so many changes in your life, and also even if you were born here and you have parents that are immigrants, you're adapting 2 cultures, and you don't feel maybe 100% of
one thing or the other.
Exactly, and you have that personal debate, right, within you. So how did you...
So it's interesting because we would actually go back to Puerto Rico every year. And so there were a lot of things that we couldn't afford, but we made that a priority. And so we would visit, and all of my, maternal and paternal family members were out there. And so my mom made it a priority because she wanted me to stay connected to my culture. And so, I would be able to taste the food and go to these places that are so beautiful in Puerto Rico, but also connect with my grandmother and, speak to them in Spanish. But there were times when I felt like I didn't belong, or I didn't speak enough Spanish, or, la gringuita, or like, oh, you must be living in a place where there's gold on the street, and it's like, what? We're struggling over there, but people tend to think that you're doing so much better. And in some cases, it's true. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit here and say that the lifestyle wasn't you earn more, for example, right, than in Puerto Rico for the most part. But the quality of life is different. And you, like I said before, you have to grow up really quickly, and it's a survival mechanism, right? So like taking the train when they're, gangs, jumping, quote unquote, like, beating people up, right? To be initiated into a gang. Like, you don't know when cuando te va a tocar, right?
No.
You're just minding your own business, and you don't know what's going to happen. There was a lot of violence, a lot of drugs. Like, I grew up around the crack epidemic, so it was the 80s, and so my experience is very unique in that way. I mean, there's tons of New Yorkers that have been through the same experiences, but as it relates to folks in Orlando, it's just a little different because it was a very urban environment and the issues were different. But
and like you mentioned, like, even though you are a citizen, right? You went through a difficult time because you will think that you will have the same opportunities as the rest of the Americans, right?
Right.
But and sometimes when I talk to many immigrants, right, and I learn about how did they come here, why, and they stayed and they don't have papers, and and actually, you think it is harder, of course, because you are maybe undocumented. You cannot work, and exactly, and things like that. But I think it's also it's hard for many Puerto Ricans as well, even though you guys have the nationality.
And it's really interesting because you grow up going to the Puerto Rican Day Parade, right? And you have flags everywhere, right? Like, you have socks that have the flag. You have little boxing gloves in your car, right? Like, the flag is everywhere.
Yeah.
And then...
But I see why. I went to Puerto Rico last year, and I'm like, you guys have an
but
amazing
it's interesting
island.
that it is, right? But I
funny.
remember visiting Puerto Rico and not seeing as many flags as I saw in New York. And later on, I came to teach Latino studies in the CUNY system, the City University of New York, because I wanted to teach about Latino history.
Wow.
And, we analyzed it and we talked about it. And at the end of the day, it's really because you're trying to reaffirm your Puerto Ricanness because you don't belong in one place or the other. So here you are, you're an American citizen. You grew up, you were born and raised in New York, and they say that education is the great equalizer. You go to school, you do well, you can buy a house, a white picket fence, the dog, the 1.5 kids, and you've made it. Well, guess what? If you're brown, Black, if you have an accent, the experience is going to be different.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we're like that, I guess, that community that you can look to and say citizenship alone and having access to certain things is not going to get you because there's still a lot of racism, a lot of bigotry, right? Classism, right? So I remember speaking to my students about that. And I have one example. I remember, like, I had my degree in my office and, I was dressed well that day. And, I went to a pretty, good school and whatever. And entonces, this woman that used to be a donor for the immigrant organization that I worked for at the time, y yo era la directora ejecutiva, right?
Wow.
Y estaba bien vestida. Hay días que yo no me visto bien, right? Like, there's days where I look like I'm cleaning the building, and that's okay, And then that day I actually looked okay. And she came into my office and she said, "Oh, who went to that school?" And I'm just like, it's my office.
Wow.
It's behind my head. I'm sitting here, So in her mind, someone that looked like me could not go to that school.
Wow.
Right. Okay. And that for me just really...
It changed her.
Yeah. I mean, it just validated everything that I had been feeling, which is no matter how hard you work, there's always going to be challenges around race and, again, your accent. I even had, like, one time, like, a midlife crisis or maybe quarter life. And I'm like, should I try to lose my accent? And my accent is different than yours, right? So my accent sounds like I'm kind of a native English speaker, but I have like a Bronx twist to it, right? Like there's something there that sounds like New Yorican, right? So that's the accent that I was trying to lose. And so, I was like, should I speak more like a white person? And should I be careful what I say and how I move my hands and my, animated like face?
The things we think, right? It's incredible. It's kind of changing who you are, right? And it shouldn't be like that. And
I had a moment where I was like, oh, would I be more successful if I shed this part of myself?
Yeah.
And I decided I wasn't going to.
Yeah. Good for you. Because you are an incredible person, professional. And I think when we embrace who we are and we were speaking about this, is that for me, like, for example, for me, it took me like to really embrace that, okay, this is Ana Carolina, you have an accent. And I was able to tell my story of why you know, because this is very personal also. The things that you go through in your life and your mindset and limiting beliefs, and that take you time to realize that sometimes what you can think makes you weaker, you can, if you know, embrace it and you turn it around, it can be, you know, your superpower. And,
I agree.
And this is why Hablamos Spanglish exists.
I agree. No, absolutely. And I when I started to really believe that my authentic self was good enough and that people needed to either like it or not. Because I walked into a lot of rooms, and still today, where people don't think I have anything to offer. And I'm like, okay, como dicen en Santo Domingo, tato. So I'm like, all right, you know, like, if this is the position you're going to take, that's fine. And then people are like, oh, she has a good idea, or she has experience, you know. I love working with the community, as you know.
Yeah. And that was going to be my question, because I think that's why, you know, your experience at an early childhood and all
that's
that.
my drive.
Yes, that's your drive.
Yo vi mucha injusticia, demasiado, you know, and I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to try to use the education that I was able to get and the access to people, mentors, you know, all the right things that happened to put me on a path that I'm proud of, to serve. You know, to serve. I saw my mom struggle. I saw people that were really great people that didn't make it. I saw, you know, girls that I went to school with at 12 and 13 years old that, you know, became pregnant at the time and could never really get out of that cycle of poverty. So, you know, I said, you know what, I'm going to do my best to use the blessings that I have in my life to do what I can for other people. So I'm super passionate about social justice issues. You know, I love bringing communities together. So like, I've worked in the African-American community, the Dominican community. I've worked in, you know, I guess, again, like mostly undocumented immigrants, you know, and I learned so much. And let me tell you, that was like humbling.
Yeah. And that's actually, you know, when did you realize that, you know, this is what I want to do with my life, and I want to serve, and this is my purpose?
Actually, when I was in undergrad, I took a class. It was called Latinos in Black and White. And it was an Afro-Latina Puerto Rican professor at Columbia University who had her dreads. Se vestía, you know, very comfortable. You know, she wasn't walking around in a suit. She was her authentic self. Okay. Y yo vi esa mujer, she passed recently, Miriam Jimenez, I think it's Jimenez. I'd have to go back and look, but she was a powerful presence. And she was teaching this class on racism in Latin America, right? And I'm like, I can't believe the injustices, you know, the marginalization of different communities within Latin America, you know, by Latin Americans and Caribbeans, right? And then continue to take courses on Latino studies and ethnic studies. Those don't really exist in Florida in the way that they should.
Exactly. I'm like, I never saw those.
Listen, so,
and I don't think, you know.
Bueno, so this is everything, right? So the reason why I feel so passionate about certain issues is that when you learn about your history, that is so moving and powerful. And when I learned that Puerto Rico was still a colony of the United States, that there were towns in Puerto Rico where 70% of women had been sterilized without being fully aware of what was happening with their bodies, because they were used as petri dishes for like pharmaceutical companies and for our economy to thrive so that we wouldn't be a burden on the United States. Mira. So when you start learning that history, you're like, wait a second.
And that's recent history, which is
1970s,
thing, right?
I mean, this is not in the 1800s, right?
Exactly.
And if you look at today in Puerto Rico, I mean, the Jones Act, I mean, so many things that are egregious that shouldn't even be happening in a post-colonial world, right? Because there's like the World Court and the UN and all these places that say, no, there are no colonies, right? We're a colony. So when I started to learn about that history, I'm like, oh, I have to do something. Like, I have to use the tools that I have, like going to a really great school and having great people around me to do something to give back. And I also wanted to teach. I said, no, the same way I saw that powerful Afro-Latina in front of that classroom at an Ivy League giving a class and being her authentic self in her jeans and her t-shirt and her dreads, I said, that's powerful. I want to do that. And so as soon as I got my master's, I said, I want to teach. So I went to a fellow Puerto Rican. She's a mentor of mine. And she was from the Bronx as well. And I said, she was getting her PhD. And I'm like, Judy, I want to teach. She's like, all right. She connected me. I was hired. And I just loved it. I loved being a Latina in front of that room as an example of what you can achieve. You can be a professor if you want. You know, I'm like this little cucarachita del Bronx, you know, that
so
by, you know, like made it against all the odds, right? And so here I am as a professor. And so that was very fulfilling for me. And I did that for 8 years in New York. Yeah. And it was all about like teaching the history of our people. And there were students that would email me years later and they're like, I didn't realize, like I was a proud Puerto Rican going to the Puerto Rican Day Parade, waving that flag, but I had no idea, you know, what the history was of Puerto Rico and the history and the complicated relationship with the U.S. And so, it was, it's a part of my life that I really love. And I still do it sometimes here and there. Like I try to do workshops and stuff, but we don't have those classes, those types of classes here, you know. I think there are institutions that have Latino history, well, let's say Latin American history and maybe literature classes that incorporate Latino authors. But I haven't seen an ethnic studies department in the way that I saw it in New York, you know? And I don't think that we're in a political climate, unfortunately, where that's going to happen. It's something that I've been wanting, you know, and I think others have wanted it, right?
Of course.
But there haven't been resources allocated to it. I mean, I work with the Puerto Rico Research Hub at UCF, among other duties there. And I'm proud that we have that, you know. And of course, there's the Centro de Estudio Puertorriqueño in New York that's been around for, I think, 40 or 50 years now.
Wow.
I think. There's definitely like an institution and institutions that have been, I guess, developed and exist. But they're up north. Yeah. And so that's...
Maybe that's a historical, you know. I think maybe that's where, you know, Latinos used to go first, you know, when they come to the U.S. So there's more history over there.
Those were the epicenter. So people went to New Jersey, to New York, to Philadelphia, to California. And then parts of California were parts of Mexico. You know, so the border crossed them. So... people just don't know that history. And so I think when you learn your history, you feel validated.
Exactly.
You know, like I'm important. I'm in a textbook. You know, my people's history is in that textbook. So it shouldn't be something that you have to dig for. I think it should be something that you learn in school. Like I feel like you should learn that in high school.
And it's history, you know, everybody is not.
But some of that history is incriminating, right? For places like the U.S., you know, U.S. intervention in places in Central America and South America, right? That it's not something we're proud of.
I think we're learning every day, you know, you know, un pasito adelante, un día a la vez. And which is important. I think right now we're embracing more, you know, diversity and inclusion. That's a hot topic. I just think that we still need to be more intentional with that, because I see so many conversations and I see that many companies, you know, are putting in place those programs, but how intentional are they being, right? Because yes, I want to reach and genuine, because I mentioned this on another episode, but I remember you know, I have my company, and I remember for a specific award, they asked me, what's your diversity and inclusion program about? And I have to research about what is a diversity and inclusion program. Like, and then when I was reading, I was like, this is not a program. This is part of our DNA, you know, who we are. Because when you are trying to, you know, connect and really, I will say connect with the Hispanic market, for example, you have to do it on a genuine way.
That's right.
I really care about connecting with this specific
not because it's
audience.
a trendy topic.
Exactly.
And honestly, I you know, and this is controversial and people may disagree, but I feel that Latinos are being left out left and right. So there's a ton of initiatives, but not enough Latino representation, right? So I feel like folks are automatically saying, okay, so let's hire an African American, or let's hire, you know, Afro-Latina that looks like this, or there's a certain prototype in people's minds in corporate America of what you need to do to comply with your DEI mission. And I think it's disingenuous, and it's gonna, what's that word? It's kind of come back to kick people in the butt because they really didn't do their homework, right? So the fastest growing demographic is the Latino population. You know, even within the Latino population, we're so diverse, right? Look at us.
Exactly.
2 women with very different experiences, right? And if you looked at any 2 women or 3 women from up north and the south, completely different, you know, as well in California, right? So I just think that, you know, folks really need to dig deeper and say, okay, what does this mean? What's our market? You know, who are we serving? What area are we in? And what makes sense for the work that we do versus thinking, oh, there's a prototype that I need to hire in order to meet this, you know, deliverable or expectation. So I haven't jumped on that bandwagon. I feel like, you know, like you said, it's part of my DNA to care about diversity and inclusion. And I don't have to call it that. I call it just loving people.
Yeah, exactly.
And being genuine and being, you know, a good person and caring about people no matter where they come from.
And I love that about you, Zoe. And,
thank
you know,
you.
and that's why I thought, like, I need to have Zoe here and sharing her story and also learn more about you, because I know you're going to inspire so many listeners out there, so many Hispanics that need to hear that, because it doesn't matter, you know, where you come from.
Right.
You know, I know it's going to be harder for us because some of us might be starting from zero, or we have to learn a new language, or even if you are born here, you go through different challenges, right? Because of that. But you can make it, because the US, I think, is an incredible country that has opened, you know, their arms to us. And if you really like, and you're an perfect example of that, you know, if you believe in yourself and you really take onto the opportunities that the country, you know, has for you, you're going to make it, and you're going to make your dreams come true.
Absolutely. And I would encourage people to work with people that they're not familiar with. You know, like I saw a lot more like Black-Brown coalitions in New York and conversations, and even, you know, groups like, you know, more established Puerto Ricans and newly arrived immigrants having conversations that I don't really see here. And that's unfortunate, because there's like, it's power in numbers, you know what I mean? So it's like, if I understand your journey and your strains and the things that you need from government, and you need, and I know yours, you know mine, and we can build a coalition, we can support each other. And I feel like because we're so diverse within the Latino community, like it's easier to divide and conquer, and people stay really siloed. So I see that a lot in Orlando. I think it's better than it used to be. But we don't have the infrastructure that New York City has, right? Where you can go to any Latino, many Latino organizations, and if you need food, is there. If you need somebody to offer you mental health services, you know, they know where to send you. Aquí la cosa está un poco diferente. No hay muchos recursos. This is not a welfare state. And some people are really proud of that, and that's fine. But it means that people that don't have really don't have and really can't make it. And so it's hard. So we need to just be a little bit more open to working with each other within the Latino community.
And you're doing such an incredible job.
I'm trying.
With the community here in Orlando, and helping our Latino community, Hispanic community, you know, by doing that, you're bridging that gap, right? And getting there, getting involved. And you know, super proud of first getting to know you and calling you my friend.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you, because I don't know how, but the time is almost
over.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm like, no, I need to have a longer conversation with Zoe.
I can speak.
But this
I
is
can
the
talk
first
a lot,
one,
so.
but not the last one.
Okay.
So, but the thing is that, what does Zoe wish, you know, for the Hispanic community to achieve in the U.S.?
In the U.S.?
Mm-hmm.
I think solidarity. I think we're in a place, it's so hard to speak about politics, and people get very disillusioned because of so many things that have happened. So without taking a position, you could probably tell what my position is, but without taking one, I think no matter what it is to get out and vote, you know, get involved in your local school, you know, make your presence felt, because we're a fast growing community, and a force to be reckoned with if we really, use our time wisely and invest in the things that really make a difference in our community. We can't just say, voy al trabajo, llego a la casa, estoy muy cansada. I know there are people that work 2 and 3 jobs. I get it. But if you don't get involved in your community, we become invisible.
Exactly.
And they call us the invisible giant all the time.
Yeah.
We go to DC all the time.
Yeah.
You hear it. You see it. If you don't make your presence felt, and you can do that by being locally engaged. If you don't want to vote, I don't agree with that, but that's fine. Get involved in a different way. You know what I mean? But otherwise, you just become, like they say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so, you just have to be involved, sea por tus niños, sea por tu comunidad inmediata. It could be that I really care about Kissimmee, so I'm going to be involved in Kissimmee. That's fine. My church, so many of our families are so involved in church. If you're not going to vote, but we have to make our presence felt. We're, soon going to be about 35-40% of the population. The entire country in another 20 years is going to be at least 50 or 51% minority, quote unquote minority. It's very powerful.
It is very powerful. But you are saying something that is super important that our community needs to know, because I have listened that, hey, I don't go to this event maybe because if I don't see a Hispanic woman or a Hispanic on that panel, I'm not attending that event. But first, we need to attend these events for the people to see us.
You have to be uncomfortable
we need to
see change.
I recently was at a room first. 90% were males, right? And then I think I was the only Hispanic, right? It felt very uncomfortable. But you know what? I was the only one there. I'm representing, and hopefully, we're going to be seen, and I'm bringing my people there. And I want more people to be included on even nonprofit committees and participating in there, because
you're a great connector.
and I love that. That's that's in my heart, because I feel like if we help each other out, if we collaborate,
that's right,
and
support each other,
that's
business
key.
or
that's key
interests,
exactly. And that's how we're gonna be able to really be seen by others, right?
I think that sometimes when you grow up low income or you've had a lot of crisis trauma, you tend to think from como un punto de deficiencia, right? Like deficiency. And so you're thinking there's not a lot of resources or things out there for me. So whatever I can get, I'm going to grab and, draw it close to myself and not share and not collaborate with people. And so I think that has happened for a long time in our communities, and so it's about survival. So it's hard to see how you can give space to someone else. And so I think we need to change that mentality.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And that happens a lot. Well, Zoe, as we're getting closer, but not done yet.
Okay.
I have to ask you a couple of questions. So, but the first thing that I'm going to be asking or mentioning some words, and you're going to say the first thing that comes to mind. Okay.
So I love games.
So first, it's going to be food.
Cheeseburger. And you can tell I'm a New Yorker.
Okay, music.
Salsa.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Favorite sport?
Well, the Bronx is Condado de la Salsa. I don't know if you knew that. Condado de la Salsa. Yep. Okay, you said sport?
Sport.
Baseball.
Okay.
Yankees. Bronx Bombers. All the way.
Okay. Yeah. And then the last one will be somebody that you want to meet. Somebody that, it can be Hispanic or non-Hispanic, but someone that you admire that you want to meet.
Oh, wow. Obama.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that he has been so graceful. No matter how many times he was attacked he's just one of these people you watch and you're like, oh my God, I think I would kill somebody if they accused me of this or did this to me or that to me. And the way he was treated while he was president, he was never the president. He was the Black president. He was never just the president. Yeah. And so I feel like, there's many people I'd love to meet, but he comes to mind because it's just his demeanor, how smart he is and what he had to deal with. And and he's just so graceful.
Oh my gosh.
And he's a wonderful dad, father and husband. And so there was so much about him. Claro que sí. Yeah.
I'm watching a documentary on Netflix that he did about workers. I don't know if you have seen it, but it's amazing.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And the last question is, who would you like to see sitting here at Hablamos Spanglish?
Oh.
Who would you nominate?
Who would I nominate? So I have a friend named Mitzi.
Okay.
And you haven't met her yet, but she's quite phenomenal. And she's a younger Latina in education and grew up in Orlando, Puerto Rican. So she's one person that I think you would enjoy meeting.
Okay.
And of course, there's so many leaders here. But I do feel like we see the same faces all the time. So that's why I said Mitzi, because she's not in the same circles that we always kind of run with. So that's one person. And she's a little younger, so it's nice to hear that perspective too.
And we do this virtually, so we can...
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
Do this, with interviewing people in New York, in even in California, in different parts of the U.S., because I want this to be a window, not only for... the ones that we leave.
I have people. I definitely have people. I know that there's a few moms in my program or women in my program, in the English program that we do at UCF that I oversee, that I think would be phenomenal because it would be a different experience, right? It wouldn't be someone that has una posición or influencia, or they do at different levels, right? In their own world, they do, but not folks that are known the
community
chamber,
leaders,
this or that. Exactly. So I think it would be powerful to see someone, like the mom that works at Walmart, the Uber driver. I think that would be pretty dope.
No, I will do that because I want to open this space to everybody.
Claro. And then, you really will understand that person's experience, right? Because you and I hope that doesn't offend anyone. We have privilege. We have privilege. We can go and buy nice things. We can have, margarita. We can have, we can afford certain things. It's we, even as Latina women with whatever disadvantages, we still have privilege, right? Yeah. And, you walk into a room, if you're light skinned, you have privilege, And so I think it's important to highlight the people that maybe don't have some of the privileges that others do. So
it is. Everybody has a story to tell, but thank you so much, Zoe, for coming.
Thank you. Zoe, yes, in Orlando, Zoe.
Thank you so much. It's been
I'm so excited to do this.
To have you. And, like I said, this conversation will continue, but I hope
sounds good. I hope to be back. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Muchísimas gracias, mi gente. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey of Hablamos Spanglish. It is a pleasure for me to explore the diverse stories and experiences within our vibrant Hispanic community. I hope that you have found inspiration, connection, and a deeper appreciation for our culture and heritage. Remember, our stories are what unite us and what make us stronger. Stay tuned for more captivating episodes in the future, and don't forget to follow us on social media and share your thoughts with us. Hasta pronto.